Desmond Sayers didn't bother with pleasantries. The moment I stepped into his glass-paneled office, he gestured to the chair across from him and slid a manila folder onto the table between us. His cufflinks gleamed under the recessed lighting, polished to the point of parody. Everything in that office, from the immaculately staged bookshelves to the zeroed-out whiteboard behind him, screamed presentation, not function. I didn't sit right away. "Take a look," he said, voice smooth as lacquer. I opened the folder slowly. Inside were printed server logs, timestamps, anomalies, access attempts. As I scanned, my eyes narrowed. These weren't just internal glitches. This was sustained infiltration through a misconfigured relay node, months of unreported exfiltration activity, routed through a port that should have been sealed. Whoever did it had access to satellite synchronization data, defense-grade infrastructure. "This was flagged 6 weeks ago," I said, without looking up. Desmond leaned back in his leather chair. "And it's being handled. All I need from you is to sanitize the trail, remove the noise. Just clean timestamps, reformat pings, maybe isolate the false positives. Nothing too dramatic." My gaze met his. "You want me to falsify breach records 2 weeks before a federal audit?" He smiled like we were sharing an inside joke. "Only if you want your badge to still scan come Monday. Look, we can frame it as back-end optimization or legacy log clearing. Semantics, really." I didn't respond. I just closed the folder. Slowly. He reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a second folder, this one pale blue, with my name typed neatly on a tab. I had a feeling he said placing it down. Voluntary separation, clean references, and a generous severance if you don't contest the language. The air in the room seemed to pause. I opened the second folder. Read the phrases like I'd never seen them before: burnout, non-disparagement, no legal liability acknowledged. I signed. No flinch, no speech, just a signature and a quiet slide of the folder back across the table. "Good luck, Morel," he said, already turning toward his monitor. I stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked out with the faintest hint of calm settling in my chest. By the time I reached the street, the story had already started to circulate. The first ping came from the company's internal mail digest, which I still had cached on my phone. Effective immediately, Morel Osborne has stepped away from her role due to burnout and personal health priorities. We thank her for her years of service. Polite, sanitized, false. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. A second ping this time, a message private from Inez Farlow. "This isn't you." "You okay?" I stared at the screen for a moment. Inez was sharp green and way too honest for corporate life. I almost typed something back. "It's bigger than you think," or "get ready," but I stopped. Instead, I saved the message to a secure cloud archive, then deleted it from my inbox. I didn't want them to know who I'd let in, even accidentally. My apartment welcomed me like a vault. Sparse furniture, blackout curtains, and the low hum of a secure Wi-Fi tunnel I'd configured years ago. The kind of space designed for silence. I kicked off my shoes, knelt by the far cabinet under the stove, and pried up the loose ceramic tile. The fireproof drawer underneath scraped as I pulled it open. 3 drives sat inside, each labeled in my handwriting. Node map, trace route, ghost audit. I picked up the 4th one I hadn't touched in 6 months. Core. The USB slid into the port on my personal laptop with a faint click. The drive mounted instantly, revealing folders by year, breach tags, staff aliases, hash directories, and compiled metadata visualizations. Everything they'd tried to bury. Every system they'd rigged. Every time someone like Desmond decided the truth was too inconvenient to live. I exhaled slowly, opened a blank directory labeled Outbound, and began pulling copies into place. Names, dates, login traces, falsified documentation. The entire skeleton was there, waiting. The evidence was intact. The question was only who would see it first. The cursor blinked on the blank document like it was daring me to hesitate. I didn't. I started with the basics: dates, timestamps, access logs. I built the skeleton the way I'd been trained to neutral tone chronological order, and no editorializing. Just facts. Just the bones. The first folder held the VPN logs, a mosaic of unapproved access points tunneling into our defense systems through internal relay nodes. One login came from a Seattle IP, then another from an untraceable proxy in Montreal, both tied to the same elevated credential. I had the MAC address. I had the packet headers. I included everything. Next came the suppressed dev tickets. I had copies of 2 specific reports from senior engineers, each flagged the same anomaly in our satellite comm uplink redundancy. Both had been reassigned, marked resolved, and closed by someone from legal, not tech. I traced the digital signature on the override. I knew whose keyboard had buried them. The Slack messages were harder to stomach. Mid-level ops managers telling junior staff to sanitize anomalies and deprioritize anything tagged with red flag metadata. One even joked, "If it ain't logged, it never happened." I attached a message from an intern, Layla Myung, who had flagged unusual spike traffic from an unregistered node. Her ticket ID was real. Her message was logged, but her ticket had been manually deleted from the Jira archive 2 days later. I had the JSON export to prove it ever existed. Every section was cross-referenced, hashed with SHA-5112, and backed up on 2 air-gapped drives. I compiled screenshots, logs, and comparison graphs. The zipped attachment weighed 39.2 GB compact, but damning. I saved the report as a locked PDF titled U.S. Gov Submission Integrity Errors 1 PDF. The final page in bold-centered text read, "Non-compliance suppression and intent to obstruct." I encrypted the file twice and stored a checksum in my offline vault. Then I uploaded the package to a draft message addressed to a whistleblower inbox at the Department of Defense. I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I sat back and watched the city lights flicker across the river, letting the weight of it all press down just enough to keep me sharp. The buzz of my phone cracked through the stillness like a warning shot. I blinked at the screen. No caller ID. The time 6:14 a.m. I answered without speaking. "Ms. Osborne." The voice was calm, clipped female. "Yes. This is Colonel Annika Drexler with the Department of Defense Cyber Integrity Division. You submitted a report to our secure channel at 2:38 Eastern. We've reviewed your initial materials. We need you online secure portal in 45 minutes. I sat upright in bed. Credentials. She recited a meeting ID and an access string. Then she hung up. I didn't hesitate. I was already moving. I booted the Faraday laptop I kept air-gapped from my home network, activated my old Navy-grade signal router, routed my signal through 3 chained VPN tunnels, Zurich, Reykjavik, then finally back into DC and authenticated with the provided key. The interface that greeted me was unmistakably federal, austere blue and white, a digital eagle embossed in the top corner. The waiting room dissolved, and suddenly I was no longer in my apartment. 8 faces appeared in the video grid. 4 wore uniforms, each with different insignia. 2 wore dark civilian suits, their eyes unreadable. 1 window was blank, no video, just a name, J. Langston, OIG Oversight. And at the center of it all, Colonel Drexler's silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight knot shoulders, squared voice steady. "You may begin," she said. No introduction, no reassurance, just the open floor. I swallowed, once adjusted the gain on my mic, and began to speak. No stuttering, no theatrics, just the timeline. October 3rd, first anomaly. October 7th, logging disabled. October 12th, suppressed dev tickets. Each step matched to logs. Credentials mirrored drive data. Screen share on. I opened the file structure and walked them through each sequence, clicking methodically through the forensic snapshots, metadata trails, VPN logs, Slack captures, deleted tickets with matching checksum echoes. No one interrupted. Not even when I showed them the comparison the logs I was asked to fabricate beside the real sequence copied and hashed 3 months prior. When I finished, I stopped sharing. No one moved. I reopened the screen share and expanded the directory labeled Syslog Integrity Watch Audit. Inside each subfolder held a day, each day held a map. I started at the point of fracture October 7th when logging went dark for nearly 2 hours without justification. A window in the network where visibility dropped to zero as if someone had pulled a curtain and then stitched it back up like nothing had happened. I pointed out the inconsistencies and the timestamps logs generated milliseconds before authentication calls a physical impossibility. Then came the Slack screenshots, Desmond's messages to senior devs, telling them to reduce noise and hold off on upstream escalations. Subtle commands that translated to one thing: delay the truth until it no longer mattered. I dragged 2 files onto the screen, side by side. Left is the version Desmond provided me, I said. Right is mine, unedited, captured and hashed in real time. Note the overwrite signatures and the gap in node echo trails on the left. On the right, continuity is preserved. The breach is traceable. A man in a dark suit leaned forward slightly. His background was blurred, but I caught the edge of an official seal. "Are you certain your versions weren't modified?" he asked, voice neutral but testing. I didn't flinch. Every log file is hashed using SHA 5112 mirrored across 2 independent air-gapped blockchains. One held locally, one distributed to a blind vault server hosted in Montana. Any modification would self-invalidate. Silence. Colonel Drexler said nothing. Neither did the analyst in the upper left corner who had been taking furious notes. Then the man nodded once. Understood. I stopped the share, folded my hands. They had what they needed. Whether or not they'd do anything with it was another matter. I'd played my part clear, precise, controlled. But truth in rooms like this didn't always win. It depended on who was willing to stand beside it when the lights came back on. Colonel Drexler glanced at someone off-screen, then turned back to me. "You'll be contacted again," she said. Then the call ended. The invitation came by encrypted email routed through a third-party scheduling service, dressed in polite language and urgent subtext. I accepted it without reply. The law office sat on the 27th floor of a downtown tower, all marble floors and silent elevators. A receptionist greeted me with the kind of smile that never reached the eyes and offered sparkling water I didn't take. Vivian Lauo met me at the door of a glass-walled conference room. Sleek, navy pantsuit, soft leather folio handshake, dry and rehearsed. She gestured for me to sit and slid a folder across the table, its tabs marked in soft pastels, lavender, teal, cream. "We'd like to make this right," she said. "The board regrets how your exit was handled. We believe in second chances." I opened the folder. A reinstatement letter, same department, new title. Director of Systems Integrity and Ethics. A 6-figure signing bonus. Oversight over internal audits. A dotted line reporting structure directly to the ethics office, which was undergoing restructuring. The numbers were clean. The contract was airtight. The language had been professionally softened, but it couldn't hide the fear underneath. "You're not offering this because of ethics," I said quietly, closing the folder. "You're offering this because the DOD froze 3 of your contracts and someone finally noticed your internal controls were cosmetic." Vivian's smile didn't flicker. She'd rehearsed for that line. "We're looking forward, Morel. We see value in what you bring." I slid the folder back across the table, then find someone else to decorate your damage. The woman from HR sitting beside her blinked like she hadn't expected me to speak. "You're declining without even reviewing the yes." Vivian's voice cooled. "You're making a mistake." I stood. I already made it. I worked for you. I left without shaking hands, without collecting the water, without looking back. In the elevator, I let the quiet settle over me like armor. I had just turned down a golden parachute, and as the doors opened onto the lobby, I already knew what that meant. The cafe was dim and smelled faintly of paper and cinnamon. Tucked beneath an old bookstore in Capitol Hill, it was the kind of place where conversations disappeared into soft lighting and jazz that no one really listened to. Caleb Rohr was already seated when I arrived. Mid-30s, wire-rimmed glasses, denim jacket, and a tablet resting beside his coffee. He stood to greet me, firm handshake, no small talk. "I've been following your work," he said as I sat. "It's rare someone inside the system pushes back this hard." "I wasn't inside," I said. "I was between the cracks." He didn't argue. Instead, he turned his tablet toward me and tapped the screen. A web of lines and circles bloomed corporate logos, shell names, LLCs filed in Delaware, Wyoming, then further out Prague, Singapore, Taipei. At the center was a name I'd never seen before, Orbis Net Solutions. "They don't have a public profile," he said, "but their subsidiaries keep appearing behind firms like StratusLink, quietly, almost like scaffolding." I leaned closer. 3 nodes blinked, red entities tied to federal contracts. One was StratusLink, another a consulting firm I'd seen on invoices. The third I didn't recognize at all. "We think StratusLink was a probe," Caleb said, "not the crime, the test. A controlled leak to see how deep access could be embedded without detection. You weren't supposed to notice. And when I did, you were supposed to walk away quietly." I studied the map. Connections lit up between known IT contractors and dormant holding companies. Some had been dissolved and re-registered within weeks. "Your breach report didn't just expose negligence," he said. "It cracked open a pattern. They weren't patching vulnerabilities. They were engineering them." I sat back, heart steady but louder than it had been. Desmond hadn't been the spider in the web. He'd been one of the threads selected, placed disposable. Caleb picked up his tablet. "Whatever you kicked open, they didn't expect light to pour through." As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. No sender, just 3 words. "You've been warned." The text sat on my screen like a fingerprint I wasn't meant to see. "You've been warned once." No punctuation, no number, just the weight of it. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I took a screenshot, encrypted it, and forwarded it to my legal team with the subject line, "Threat. Probable origin unclear." I copied my DOD contact with a silent BCC attaching a checksum of my device logs from the past 12 hours. Then I activated RedWatch protocol. Each of my external nodes began encrypting themselves in sequence. Local access to anything tied to the whistleblower folder was cut. New keys were generated, pushed to a cold backup, and routed through a private vault I kept mirrored across 2 jurisdictions. The air in my apartment thickened, not with fear, but with the gravity of confirmation. They'd seen me. By morning, I had a reply from Colonel Drexler. 1 line. "Thank you. We're escalating." The next 12 hours passed in a slow drip of updates. Just after noon, a second message arrived, this time from a classified domain. 2 StratusLink board members, Martin Zell and Clara Bryn, were now under active federal surveillance. The department had uncovered significant financial entanglements between their personal holdings and a Luxembourg-based shell owned by Orbisnet. I stared at the email, rereading it 3 times. I knew the web existed. Caleb had shown me the map. But this was confirmation from inside the machine, the kind that didn't come lightly or without momentum behind it. Their silence had been shattered. The noise was rising. I stepped away from my laptop and crossed to the window. The city moved outside like it always did, unaware that a thread had been pulled hard enough to loosen its seams. They had threatened me, tried to purchase me, tried to erase the path I uncovered. Now they were being watched, not just by me, but by systems that couldn't be bought. And somewhere deep in that system, someone had just pulled the next lever. The DOD building looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 90s. The elevator jerked once on the way up. The hallway smelled faintly of burned coffee and dust. I followed the directions down to a conference room with a mismatched table and a flickering light panel above it. 2 men were already seated inside. No nameplates, no dramatics. Just 2 suits that fit slightly wrong and folders placed deliberately in front of them. Ms. Osborne once said, motioning to the chair. "I'm Agent Reeves. This is Agent Carson." I nodded once and sat. Reeves opened the first folder and slid 2 documents across the table. Arrest warrants. Desmond Sayers, Jasper Wendley, the CTO and head of IT. Charges listed: wire fraud, obstruction of justice, tampering with classified infrastructure. They weren't suggestions. They were signed. Everything you gave us, Reeves said, plus what we recovered internally painted a picture even their own legal couldn't explain away. They're being taken into custody this afternoon. I didn't respond. I couldn't yet. Some part of me had expected the system to bend, to dilute everything into silence. But here it was, in ink and seal and irreversible paper. Carson reached for the 3rd folder. This one was thinner, cream-colored. Whistleblower compensation summary, he said, sliding it forward. Based on risk profile breach scale and projected damages prevented. The number stared up at me like it didn't belong on paper. $1.4 million. You didn't just catch a leak, Carson said quietly. You cracked a tunnel. I kept my expression still. Gratitude wasn't the feeling. Neither was pride. Just something slower, heavier. Like balance finally shifting in the right direction. Reeves leaned back slightly. There's more. 2 board members tied to Orbisnet are under review for conspiracy to obscure jurisdiction. That's not just internal, it's international. I looked down at the warrants again, the signatures, the weight of their names. Desmond had tried to erase a breach. Jasper had helped bury it. Now they were evidence. I stood, thanked them both, and took the folders. I already knew what I was going to do next. The podium was plain, no branding, no spotlight, just a clean wood surface and a mic that buzzed slightly if you leaned too close. Behind me, the seal of Sentinel Integrity Systems glinted under the soft lighting. It still felt strange to call it mine. Rows of faces stared up, some expectant, others thoughtful. Policy analysts, compliance officers, engineers in worn hoodies. At the center of the front row sat Inez, tablet in hand, her badge labeled Head of Operations. She caught my eye and nodded once, steady and sure. She'd earned that title. She'd earned all of this. I cleared my throat and began. 1 year ago, I said I filed a report that at the time felt like shouting into a void. It exposed a breach in infrastructure and a deeper breach in culture. But I wasn't alone. I had logs. I had timestamps. I had truth. A pause. Not for effect, just for breath. But the fact that I had to weaponize data to be believed says more than I'd like to admit about the systems we operate within. I let the silence sit a moment longer before continuing. Truth should not depend on a whistleblower. It should be built into the code, into the process, into the bones of what we create. Applause rose like a slow tide, quiet at first, then steady. I didn't need the ovation. I needed them to listen. Later backstage, I sat alone on a folding chair with my phone in my hand. A news alert blinked on screen. Former StratusLink CTO sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. I didn't smile. I didn't pump a fist or call anyone. I just nodded once and let the notification slide away. The work wasn't over. Sentinel had grown 2 new contracts with nonprofit data guardianship firms, a framework model being piloted with an independent voting security lab, and a call from Ukraine about infrastructure support in conflict zones. We didn't build firewalls. We built transparency accountability architecture that resisted corruption, not just intrusion. No heroes. No need for martyrs. Just code that couldn't lie. And people who refused to.